Welcome back to the Jason Q Citizen and Friends program, and on the show to discuss more of how we understand how the manipulation is working, not just on to ourselves, but also on to society as a whole. And if we can better understand how the manipulation works, we can better understand ways of being able to get through. And who better to get on the program to get inside the way they think than the former United Australia Party candidate for Griffith, the same seat that former Prime Minister Kevin Rudd once held. The very, very switched on and clearly smarter and better looking than Kevin Rudd, it's Rob McMullen. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jace.
You didn't think I could outdo myself, did you?
No, I didn't. You always blindside me with your intros. I love it.
Well, the funny thing about Kevin Rudd out of all of this is he's the first human being I've ever seen when he has a beard, he looks exactly like his own emoji would.
That's true. He's like a little Santa emoji.
He so does. Good. He's the human emoji. It's quite
yes.
It's a funny thing.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious.
So here we are, and well, at least you've got that as a claim to fame. But Rob, in everything that we're watching now, and I hope you heard the news before when we're talking about the sixth interest rate rise in a row. And now we've got Adam Bandt really coming out and pushing the idea that we need to have a rent freeze, which would save, he says, tenants an average of $3,000 a year at a time when just this last 0.25% rate rise is going to force around between $1,200 and $2,000 a year extra just on that component to the average mortgage holder. In fact, if someone's got a $750,000 mortgage 6 months ago, they would have been paying $19,425 interest, give or take, on a year. And today that's now $38,925. So it's actually doubled. It's gone from $373 a week to $748 a week in interest in just 6 months. So we need to understand how it is that someone like Bandt can say what he says and actually be considered responsible or as a Green in the inner city seat of Melbourne where he operates, and yet he acts like he's the Marxist Prime Minister of Australia. Can we put a perspective on what he's saying?
Well, look, I think the Marxist strategy all around is to foster dependence. You know, it's just getting harder and harder for people who want to, you know, work a small business or work a trade or a job and be left alone. It seems like, as you said on your Facebook post, I noticed the government gives and the government taketh away. You know, they take away and then they present themselves as a solution. You know, but really, I think it's important to remember that the core doctrine of Marxism, its very cornerstone sentiment, is from each his ability to each his need. And what that actually means, if you think about it, is that redistribution from those who have the ability to generate wealth or capital or excess to those who need it. So redistribution is the engine of Marxism and is the engine of big government. So, of course, he's going to say, well, let's get the government involved in rents. It's going to be another... It's not a technically a redistribution of funds, but it is a government involvement in protection from, rents going up, which is another form of redistribution because it's a subsidy from market forces. It's a protection from market forces. So once again, I'm not even surprised everything Adam Bandt does is going to be some sort of protection from the market or some interventionist policy or some kind of redistribution, because from each his ability to each his need, redistribution is the engine that drives the entire ideology. So I'm not even surprised.
This is the thing, right? Because on the surface, if you aren't economically trained and you're just observing from the outside, and perhaps you're just a young person who's entering into the market, deciding to move out of home, and you realise just how expensive rents are, and they are very expensive in Australia, no matter where you live. I mean, even in rural areas, you're paying, a lot of money to rent anywhere. And you would think that would make a lot of sense, that it sounds fair. But what you're not seeing, of course, is what we talk about in terms of market forces. Unfortunately, in Australia, property is just excruciatingly expensive. The cost of building, construction is unbelievably expensive. The cost of materials, the cost of labour. It's the only profession that built-in price rises are, if you go and buy a home, you're protected for a period of 12 months from a new home builder, but then they will have built-in price rises that take over at that point. So if you're waiting for land to be registered or to go through council and you go outside that period, the price automatically goes up. So if you've committed to a build price of $600,000 or $700,000, it'll be $610,000 or $712,000 at the end of that period. And so all those prices are factored in. So it's impossible in anything to do with shelter in Australia to even consider the idea because someone else has got to pay. Now, the other argument may well be that perhaps what we need to do is to look at it and say, well, if you own a rental property, you're a wealthy person. And yet we have superannuation in this country, which is a way that all people can choose to build for their retirement. But it's not the only way you can build for your retirement at all, of course. The point being that we are all meant to be able to prepare for our retirement. It's within the Australian culture. So therefore it makes sense then you can't then stymie other ways that you can earn money, and one of those things being property. Then what's he going to do next? He's going to ban capital gains on precious metals or capital gains on managed funds, because it's another way that you can make money. It defies logic, all of it. And this is the argument that's going on. Now, what we'll do is we'll pause for news headlines, Rob. When we come back, let's get into it a little bit more so that we can start to point where these tentacles of Adam Bandt and his parasitic buddies are going to, so we can get a much better understanding of why this is failed policy. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to TNT Radio.
For a complete list of shows and our schedule offered on TNT Radio, simply visit our website at tntradio.live. We serve up the latest live news and current affairs, presented by a host of credible and expert commentators who can separate fact from fiction, truth from propaganda, keeping you in the loop on TNT Radio.
It's not just fixing rents. It's a system, and in many ways, it's a cancerous growth on productivity. Rob, let's look a little bit deeper into why it is that Marxism has become a social technology of dependence.
So, yeah, looking at the big picture stuff, remember we had our little political theory, the triangle, where on the left you've got the caretakers, and on the right, you've got the capitalizers, and in the middle, the pointing upwards, the middle of the triangle is the cooperation between the two. The cooperation being like a stable relationship between these two poles, because they're not actually going to go away. Often in politics, it's not about getting everything we want, but it's about getting enough of what we want so that we can have peace and prosperity in a stable cooperative society that's hopefully evolving in a positive direction. And so once again, can we get enough cooperation between the caretakers and the capitalizers? Now, so what brought this about? I think we're in a situation now, for a variety of reasons, where the axis is tipped heavily to the left, where the Marxism angle is very strong. And so once again, on the left, you've got caretakers, dependents, and the ideology of Marxism, because that's what a philosophy does. In the same way that to understand a concept, we understand a concept and it solidifies in our mind when we have a word for it. Well, a philosophy solidifies understanding and strengthens a strategy. And so the caretakers, those who want to caretake and those who need to be taken care of, Marxism is like a solidification of a strategy for those people. And as such, it's a very effective, say, social technology. Like if we invent, say, if I've got a problem in the physical world, like I need to get to A to B. We've created physical technology. You create a car. You invent a car to create a problem in the physical world, such as travel from point A to point B. But the caretakers, the dependents, the resource that they're trying to mine is the productivity of other people. And so they create their own technologies, but a social technology to aid in the strategy of mining that resource. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
That's largely what Marxism is it's a solidification of the strategy of caretaking for dependence. Now, on the flip side, we've got what should be conservatives. And there's two people. I was listening to Tony Abbott's speech at the recent CPAC, and I just got a couple of little words from Malcolm Roberts' speech. Very different people who call themselves conservatives. Now, Marxism as a strategy for the dependents, you've got to think of these things as an arms race between these two poles, these two, both caretakers, capitalizers. It's an arms race. And now we're very tipped to the left because Marxism is such an effective social technology. And the capitalizers, the conservatives, don't understand it. So it's, where we might have had a ceasefire, we might have had a peace, we might have had even a cooperation. The Marxists essentially have created this new technology. It's like they've got invisible missiles because it's extremely destructive, and the conservatives can't even see it. And that's what really frustrated me about Tony Abbott, is when he spoke about things, he even admitted, I'm out of touch with the modern world. I don't understand these things. I don't understand the modern world. I don't understand this gender pronouns. He doesn't get it. He doesn't see the technology. He doesn't see the weapon. But what we can do is uncover the weapon, uncover the way it's used. And so really, Marxism at the interpersonal scale, all these things are very scale dependent. At the interpersonal scale, it's simply being nice to people, like caretaking or whatever. Another interesting thing, that scale is another interesting axis to put into these things, because funnily enough, communism is an appropriate morality for a family. I don't expect my children to be equal contributors. I expect from my ability to my children's need in my family. But that's at an interpersonal level. That's at a small scale. But when you try to scale these intuitions, what Marxism does is it takes that strategy and it scales it up to the level of civilizational, like you said, cancer, or even warfare. And that's where we're at now. It's reached such a scale that this caretaking instinct, the strategy of dependence, has scaled to a point of being civilizational warfare. And the conservatives like Tony Abbott, the old conservatives, the wealthy conservatives, don't see it. They just see it as silliness. But it's actually warfare. It's actually invisible missiles of civilizational warfare. And so the big project that I would like to do is uncover the mechanisms and show the weapons of warfare and how Marxism works, but then also move on to, if we go up to the scale of, say, you've got the morality of dependence within a family, but what's the morality of between equal adults? You could even say sovereign adults. A sovereign citizen is someone who is responsible for their own life, doesn't make claims on other people, and doesn't want claims made upon them. It's like the equals, people who are equally responsible. What is the morality between sovereign equal adults is reciprocity. So where Marxism, you have redistribution, you have from each's ability to each's need. That is their cornerstone morality. The cornerstone morality of conservatism really needs to be reciprocity, because it's the morality between sovereign adults. And I think that understanding is sorely lacking. And so as a result, what we have now is the Marxist strategy, and the way it is working in its circles is very strong. It's very effective. The conservatives are very weak. And so they're actually beyond, most of them are beyond weak. They're actually so naive as to not even realize that they are in a war of sorts. It's not a physical war because we don't see it. Because, once again, I've spoken before about the empathetic brains or the systematic brains and how they kind of loosely map onto the left-wing dependence empathetic brain, where someone who's empathy-brained, their resources are the people because they interact with people empathetically, you know what I mean? Whereas somebody who is more systematically brained, well, systematically brained people act upon the world and create the resources. Now, Malcolm Roberts only caught a couple of words of his speech, but he said, what is a conservative? A conservative is someone with critical thinking. A conservative is someone with a realistic view of the world. That's actually all I got. And I'll disagree with Malcolm. These are part of the picture of what is required for a conservative. But if you, once again, you go back to the capitalizer, the person who works in reality, in empirical reality, to generate resources, what he's saying is partly correct, because you actually do need critical thinking and you actually do need a realistic view of the world to affect change on the world, to create resources in empirical reality. You know what I mean? You need critical thinking to make an airplane stay in the sky or to make a bridge stay up. It's not up to your feelings. However, when you're an empathetically brained, social resource mining Marxist, the social tools are more relevant, so your emotions do work on other people and what they can give you. So you've got this whole, I'm waving my hands around like a crazy person, like that meme, the guy pointing to the whiteboard with all the interconnected things and my disheveled hair being like, yes. But, that's the way this thing all sort of fits together. And the empathetic brain is really important to understand, because one of the ways they attack, one of the missiles that they have that conservatives just don't see, is reputation destruction, social status destruction. Tony Abbott himself was a victim of this, because I didn't even know who Tony Abbott was before I saw a picture of him walking around in his Speedos on the beach, knowing that I should hate this guy.
Yes.
Because apparently he looked bad in his detox.
Yeah.
Now that, when I was sort of younger and more of a dependent myself, I didn't really understand these dynamics, but that is an example of reputation destruction. It's reputation destruction to move the herd of dependents in a certain direction of dependence. And Tony Abbott doesn't see that. Conservatives don't see that because they don't understand these invisible missiles, this invisible warfare of social status destruction or social reputation destruction. And that's one of the big important things about it. So just looking through a couple of my notes here, a lot of these things, I'm explaining these things so that people can kind of see it. And we talked about credentialism. Credentialism as opposed to genuine merit. In a situation of genuine merit, once again, you're going to have the systematic brain person who acts on empirical reality. You can't credentialist your way into, like I said, a bridge standing up. The credential should follow the genuine empirical merit. But for credentialists, it's almost reversed, like the paper makes the merit, because it's a social agreement. And so what you see in all these sort of things is that the credentialist, that ties even in with the social-brained Marxist thing again, because they're working in the realm of the social. They're working in the realm of people's emotions. They're working in the realm of social agreement. And as such, they inhabit bureaucracies and institutions where they can generate social consensus. Whereas,
I think, Rob, that's where you've hit the nail on the head there. It's the system itself no longer operates as a meritocracy, the political system itself, does it? And so, therefore, it's like they are incapable within the political structure, left or right, to even know what meritocracy or a market or what you talk about is the scaling up process where the empirical value must take over from the ability of someone to be able to buy and sell goods and services, if that makes sense.
That's right. That's right. I was thinking about even in the market for goods and services, say, you run a small business or something, yes, you're dealing with people. So you're going to have the ability to empathetically interact with people. But if you do it at such a scale beyond the people that you can actually interact with, a kind of empirical meritocracy emerges, because the empirical meritocracy comes down to what value are you providing to people who don't have the ability to interact with you? You know what I mean? Like if I buy a new car, I can't go and hear the sob story of the guy who designed the car. It's either a good car or it's not.
Well
and
said.
so there is in a market, in the market for voluntary goods and services, there is once again an empirical meritocracy emerging there because of the scale of it.
Yep.
And so once again, you get your systematic brain capitalizing, wealth-creating conservatives more at home in that, because it's an empirical reality. Are you providing value to people that largely don't care about you? That's an empirical question. Whereas if you work in a government office or an institution or something, or in a university, and you know everybody, you have the opportunity to create a social agreement on who gets what, or use your empathetic social skills to climb through the ranks, that sort of thing. So once again, you get this where the empathy brains go versus where the system brains go.
Yes.
So once again, on the left side of things, caretaking, dependence, and I'm going to say childlike. The childlike Marxist, they've generated this philosophy which has given shape, it's given power, it's given moral license to their strategy of dependence and basically getting stuff.
I like what you're saying. We're going to take a break in a moment, Rob. I just want to make a couple of points there. That when we talk about the childlike process, and I want to get into this after the break, it's the weakening of the system to make it almost impossible to behave or act, what I would say, at the margins. And I'll give you a very simple example. In business, if let's say you're a taxi driver and you have to go and buy a vehicle, that's the cost of doing business. You have to buy insurance, and it's a special taxi driver insurance. It's expensive. It's the cost of doing business. You have to buy a uniform, cost of doing business. Adam Bandt's proposal to freeze rents is trying to apply something to protect someone, but really what he's doing is applying something called a cost for doing business, not of, but for. It's like a punishment now. And this is the difference, because someone who's elected to a position who's got no credential at all to be the person who's determining business and money and economics is the one that's simply applying his position of power and influence to therefore get the best gains for people that aren't even his constituents. That's what is so frustrating about watching Adam Bandt. And it's also the psychology of Adam Bandt to assume Marxist ideology all around the country, despite the fact that he's the member for one seat in Victoria of 100, and there's 150 other seats in Australia. And so that would be an illustration, therefore, of what we're talking about here. And what I argued in the beginning was like the cancer, because this thing spreads amongst the Marxists. If I can get Marxism in here in my local community, I'll bring it to my state, I'll bring it to my country. Goodness me, I'll bring it to the world. And there we have globalism in its own form, which is you will own nothing and be happy, part of the Great Reset. And as you said, there's dismantling with the interest rates going up, rents being fixed, impossible to own a home as your property prices are falling in real time now. As interest rates go up, people are reporting property prices officially are falling each month. It's kind of tragic. So much to talk about after the break. We're going to have limited time to do it. We'll take that break now and come back with more here on TNT Radio.
Give me a minute with TNT Radio's Steve Malzberg.
I love when conservatives come to the rescue of other conservatives. Tooting their own horn, Fox News says Facebook has reversed a permanent ban on conservative children's book publisher Brave Books after Fox Business started asking questions about the ban. Brave Books publishes books for 4 to 12-year-olds. They told Fox that Facebook suspended them and denied an appeal. The publisher says they put out books that have pro-God, pro-America, and anti-woke values. Brave Books founder Trent Talbot called the suspension an existential threat to the company since they rely on Facebook advertising. The publisher produced a Facebook message which provided no explanation for the ban and stated that it was their final decision. Talbot called the incident a prime example of big tech today, adding they shut down small companies who say anything contrary to their woke agendas. And according to Talbot, a suspension from Google earlier this year was also reversed after Fox News reported on it. Thanks for giving me a minute. I'm Steve Malzberg for TNT Radio.
Emergency, police, fire, ambulance.
Hello?
Yes, police, fire, or ambulance.
It's my friend. I love you, please.
Okay, look, I need you to stay on the phone. Just stay on the phone.
She's turning blue.
Okay, now hang on. Oh.
000's sole job is to connect you to emergency services. So please, stay on the line and you'll get help faster.
A cashless society means zero cash. No tipping the waiter or hairdresser. No giving to busking musicians. No selling unwanted items for cash. No buying anything with privacy. Digital currency means every cent you receive will be recorded and every transaction tracked. Lighting the fuse for freedom. TNT Radio.
Welcome back to the Jason Q Citizen and Friends program. I'm here with Rob McMullen, and the purpose of our think tanks is to try and understand the psychology of what it is that's driving people to be completely cognitively dissonant, not understand the bigger picture of what's going on, and at the same time realize the mechanics that is what is making more and more people move away from understanding the idea of independence versus becoming dependent. It's very, very sad. It's something that you teach your children from a very young age to become independent, such as making their own lunches or just knowing how to when they get a little bit older, to use the stove or to do something that's going to help them as they get older and they become more and more responsible. But it just seems like we're losing that ability, Rob.
Well, yes, look, to understand the psychology, they're explicit about it. Once again, I'll say it again, from each his ability to each his need, which is the psychology of how you treat children. Yes. Because once again, I don't expect reciprocity with my son. I expect to give resources to flow from me down to him. And so, and we all start out as children. And so at one point in everybody's life, that morality, that strategy made complete sense. But what we need to do is above that, as you move into sovereign adults, like say you're in a market and someone says, okay, people know, okay, I'm a musician. I can't go around to people and say, I can't suck and still get hired because I'm in a voluntary market. And people are going to say, well, sorry, I wish you all the best, but if you want me to hire you, you have to be good. You have to do what I want, and you have to be providing me a positive value. So I'm in a situation of reciprocity. I'm not in a caretaking situation with my clients. I'm in a situation of providing mutual reciprocal increases in value. And that is the morality of adults, sovereign adults. But what the Marxism thing is, it's a strengthening, it is a philosophical fleshing out, and it is solidifying of the strategy of dependent children. And the funny thing is too, you always ask Marxists, well, you always get this wealthy elites, but that's the end result is this stratification of two classes, the dependents and the elite class, those who need to be taken care of and those who do the caretaking. And once again, it's those of us in the middle who wish to have a society of reciprocal adults who cooperate. That's more of a middle class morality, where we're all trading as reciprocal adults. So the society that they want to move into is dependents and elites, whereas the society that conservatives would want to generate is a middle class society of reciprocal adults.
Yes.
And so they are fostering dependence because it's their strategy. That's what Marxism does. It's all across the board, it's redistribution. So you've got direct financial redistribution, protection from market forces is a form of redistribution. And the reason why the COVID thing didn't surprise me at all is because it was another form of redistribution. Some people needed something and they were willing to take it from other people. So what they said is, I'm scared of COVID. I'm scared of this. I want to wear a mask. I want to feel safe. I have a need. And I'm going to put the cost of what I need onto you, onto your small business, onto your ability to see your family or your ability to get across borders. And so once again, it was just another form of redistribution. Now, the problem is the big picture here is over the course of these chats, what I want to do is see the missiles with the Marxist strategy, because conservatives don't see it as much as they should. They don't see it as warfare. It's because that's the problem. It starts out as caretaking. It starts out as good manners in a sense. But if it scales up enough, it becomes civilizational warfare.
Well, that's exactly where we are at the moment, aren't we? Because really,
exactly where we are.
What we're talking about here is not just making a contribution, it's the value of the contribution. And it's ironic because those that have become dependent on the government have actually withdrawn their participation, and the government allowed them to do that. We, in fact, enabled it with COVID by sending people home and paying them the $750 a week. And in the process, any system that we now can see that erodes the middle class is working towards this idea of serfdom. It's ironic that the Marxist movement first starts with the idea of creating equal opportunity, which sounds very fair, and then it moves to a new situation which we could look at as the equal opportunity of outcome, equal outcomes. And then when you get further than that, you can't get an equal outcome. It'll never happen. It's unrealistic. And it's impossible. And yet it seems to be that we start with the children. We have equal outcomes at school. We don't have any more competition. We don't have proper report cards. And so we build a social cohesive structure, therefore, that everyone's the same. And you get out into the real world and you either are going to continue on that method politically, or you're going to realize that all these poor kids are ill-equipped to deal with real life. And then we see the idea of so many depressed children now, so many suicides, etc. There's no understanding of competition. It's almost foreign for a child to understand it. Even in rugby league, we learn on the weekend there's no more grand finals until a child hits 13. So the child's got to be in year 8 at school before they even know what winning a competition is. To me, this is part of this fabric. It's all intertwined, isn't it, Rob?
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned the WEF. That's what I'm talking about. We will move into a society of serfs and the elite class. They say you'll own nothing and you'll be happy because they'll own it all and they'll lease it to you and you'll be a serf. That's where this leads. We want a middle-class society of reciprocal adults. And, like I said, they're not going to stop because they can socially construct, which basically means group wishful think, using their empathetic interactions and their skills of social agreement. They can socially construct their fantasies away from the empirical realities of life, but they can do that because they keep mining our physical resources. And so I think that's the only reason they can do it. They got hold of the media, they got hold of the money printing, they got hold of the government, they can tax you as much as they like. So they're off spending like a drunken sailor, like spending like a gambler in Vegas on the never-ending credit card of other people's money and thinking that they're running a successful business because they're removed from the empirical reality. Now, to what degree they're even capable of understanding it, because being empathetically brained tilted a little bit that way, they're more likely to be a bit more system blind. Who knows? Or maybe it's just incentives, but that's what's happening. So the only solution I can see is to move into and to promote a reciprocal philosophy of reciprocity, because that is the morality of adults, not dependent children. And I'm hoping that we'll find enough conservatives who understand that, to understand that this Marxist thing has gotten to the point, it's scaled to the point of warfare.
Yep.
So we need to up our game in the arms race. We need to develop our strategy in response, which ultimately is going to be reciprocity.
Yes, well said. Now, I understand you're doing a whole lot of writing at the moment and planning and thinking, and this is all part of it. We've got many exciting new ventures coming up, and I noticed that the UAP is going to field upper and lower house candidates in the seat of Victoria. So, Rob, if you choose to move south 2 states, there may be an opportunity there, but I'm hoping that you've got other things and bigger fish to fry up in Queensland. It's been great to have you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I look forward to discussing further more of the work that you're doing. We've got the news next, and in the next hour, I've got Dr. J. Anthony Kunasaran coming on the show.